somebody says I'm sorry, I don't give a like, instead of getting good at apologizing, get good at just not doing the thing. You're doing something else. I think I could start off with, like, I just want to, like, get into it. You know what I mean? So, context behind it, I think, is there's been, like, multiple situations recently where different people have acted a certain way that has been mean or just, like, bullying, but then they apologize and then say, that's not what I meant to do. And I'm like, I don't give a like, instead of getting good at apologizing, get good at just not doing the thing. You're doing something else.
We have a culture of, we overvalue apologies.
I think most people do things because other people do things. It is, in many cases, socially acceptable, or it's normal, that when somebody says, I'm sorry, we excuse the behavior and do not expect them to change or anything. We don't put a plan in place. If somebody was really sorry, they would change their behavior. Like, I've realized for myself, even with, like, Alex, for example, I will say I'm sorry, but I actually say, I am sorry, here's what I'm going to do moving forward. And then I commit to a plan with myself of how I'm going to change my behavior. And so I don't think, oh, me saying I'm sorry is going to change the relationship or make it better, right? Saying I'm sorry isn't going to make our relationship better. It's not going to change my behavior. Me putting a plan in place and determining what I need to do differently is going to make it better.
It seems like that's the difference between, like, an apology and a real apology that, like, you would accept is if it is accompanied by commitment to action.
I would say it's commitment to a plan, which you could make on your own, or you could collaborate with the person depending on what kind of relationship it is. The same goes for intimate relationships, you know, couples fighting. A lot of the time somebody will do something bad or unethical to the other partner, and then they will say, I'm sorry, and then they get back together because punishment fades, say 4 or 6 weeks later. The same thing happens. They say, I'm sorry, they get back together, but the frequency continues to go up and it happens faster and faster until eventually, like, something happens, right? Which is usually it ends, but it's like, wouldn't you want to end it before that happens? But I think the way to resolve it is what I've given, like, advice to people who have asked me is, what are you going to do differently due to this mistake or mishap? Like, what behavior will you change? And sometimes that means asking the person, asking your boss, asking your spouse, asking your friend, what can I do differently next time? If you don't know, ask. Because I've noticed this cycle of somebody does a thing, then they apologize for doing the thing, and they're very good at apologizing. And so everyone says, oh, they didn't mean to. And now they get to keep their job. There's no punishment. There's no consequences, nothing. I wouldn't say punishment. There's no behavior change. There's no feedback given. Sometimes there is feedback given and there's no demonstration of change. And so why is this person still on the team if they have bullied somebody? You have told them not to bully somebody and told them what to do instead. They have not done that and instead just done the same thing again 3 times. Now the whole team avoids them and hides from them, and you keep them on the team anyways. What I see is that that department that person represents, for example, there's one where it's like a marketing department, and then the 2 closest departments, sales and customer success, have gotten worse while this department's gotten better. Do I think that's because of the skill of the person or the fact that this person bullies these 2 people? And so you see how it translates into the performance of the business, which is frustrating because they're all pointing to, like, I think it's the onboarding deck or this. I'm like, it's the fact that Sally is a bully and she bullies the head of sales and the head of customer success. And so then they don't perform in their job. They don't apply discretionary effort. And because of that, the business suffers.
But I think these cycles happen.
It's the unwillingness of somebody to say, hey, you know what? That person is a bully. They're acting like one. I don't want to have them on my team. And the next natural thought is a lot of leaders like, but I should be helping them change. Do you have the skill to help them change? Do you have access to somebody who does have the skill? Is that within the scope of your job? There was a decent amount of leaders that exhibited bully-like behavior to their teams. And I was on there and said, like, I do not think this person is a good fit. It has been clear that they have shown us that they will say these words and then they just do it again and then say these words. There's no consequence in order. And so the cycle continues to happen. Because of that, they say the same thing every time, which is, well, they didn't mean to do that. They didn't mean to come off that way. They didn't intend to be mean to the person. And the question that I shoot back at them is, so who does? Does anybody intend to be a complete dick or bully to people? No, they do the thing. And so, like, the thoughts that are coming through your head or the feelings or the desire for something else to occur is irrelevant because you acted as a bully, right? In those situations. You cannot prove the existence of these thoughts or feelings that you say that you have. And even if you do, they are irrelevant to the fact that you acted in this way. Therefore, you are perceived in that way.
Will you say more about this idea of, like, perception is reality? Because I think it It's really important.
If you behave like a mean person, people perceive you as a mean person. No thought or feeling that you claim to have had, which they cannot prove the existence of, is going to change their mind. They just have the evidence, which is that you you said these words to me, you raised your hands, you raised your voice, you threatened me, you told me you were gonna fire me if I didn't do these things. And so to that person, you have acted like a bully. Whether you meant to or not, doesn't really matter. And I think that a lot of the times it also means, like, people say, because I didn't intend to do something, that I am not a bully. I didn't mean to bully the person, therefore I'm not a bully. Okay, well then what the fuck constitutes a bully? And it's just frustrating me lately because I think I've had a lot of conversations with people who have said, no, I am not punishing. Well, you are, because you do it.
Do you find value in trying to understand what was going through their head and their intention?
I find value in trying to understand what somebody was thinking when they made a mistake. I find less value in treating it differently because I know why. For example, on a team, if somebody does something that exhibits like punishing behavior to my team, and I talk about, and I represent somebody who I don't do that with my team. I do not intentionally punish people or threaten people to get them to change their behavior, right? And I think we all know that. If somebody else on my team were to do that, and they did it in front of a team, say in front of a group of people, 10 people, 15 people, but then later they tell me why they did it, and it was a reason that I'm like, okay, them thinking these things, it made sense because in their past, they were reinforced for acting that way. Okay, well, how long will it take me to change their behavior? How long will it take for the team not to be terrified of that person? Can I afford that in my business? And so sometimes in business, it's like you sacrifice one for the many. It's like determining who's on and off the bus, I think, is really imperative. The world is not perfect. Like, even if I have the skill to change someone's behavior, I have to ask myself realistically, like, how much time is that going to take? What's my ROI? What's my return on my effort for changing that person's behavior? Could I get a larger return if I put my efforts onto the people who don't have these adverse behaviors? Or if I got somebody new, because maybe it would take me 6 months to change this person's behavior. All the meanwhile, like the team, they're not interacting with that person. They're not having those interactions. They're not seeing any progress made. And so they just have this perception that that's what is okay with Layla.
And you might not even have a 100% probability that like you're going to be able to change the behavior even after a period.
But I think a better question to ask is, like, for me, it's understanding what is within my scope as somebody's boss in terms of helping change their behavior. Because I tend to reach outside my scope because I have the ability, and I've demonstrated that to myself in many relationships in my life that I could. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so I think it's asking yourself, like, given this relationship, what is within my scope of work? What is worth my return on effort? If you took that effort that you put to helping that one person change for 8 months, and you have the likelihood of, like, maybe 50%, whatever. But if you took that and you spread it around all of your team or onto the 2 people with the most potential, like, how much more return would you get on your effort?
Do you think if someone acts in a way they did not intend to, they should be forgiven when they apologize?
I think we would have to define what forgiveness means. Like, what does it mean to forgive somebody? I think a lot of the times when we say, like, oh, I forgive you, it's like, I excuse that behavior. I think something that would be more productive would be like, I understand you are human. What can we do to prevent that behavior from happening again? But my question is, how frequently does it happen? If somebody fucks up one time a year, I mean, I fuck up more than one time a year. You know what I mean? Like within the context of a certain situation, if they fuck up once a year, okay. But if they fuck up every week, so I think it has more, like, for me, it has to do with the frequency of the fuck ups. Is the frequency going up or down? And so if it's going down, I would say that's progress. If it's going up, I would say that that's not progressing. It's interesting because it's like, what's actually happening with somebody when they apologize? Like, I don't know, this like is occurring to me the other day. I'm like, somebody apologizes and then somebody says, I forgive you. It's like nothing's happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's literally fucking nothing. And so if no action is coming from that, people are just saying words to people, what's the point in either? You could just skip all of it and just say, I will do this differently next time, and here's what I'm going to do.
When I think of people forgiving, I think of them releasing anger, or like there's some kind of emotional component to that. Does that feel like relevant?
I don't know if you can physically release an emotion. Do you think so?
I think you can maybe decide to stop ruminating on it as much.
I think that what I have found for myself, I was told for a very long time, like, you shouldn't bottle up your emotions. You should, like, really feel them and, like, allow them to, like, move through your body and, like, really, like, allow yourself to really feel the experience. And I actually think that is a form of rumination in many of the times. I also don't understand, what is that doing for me? I'm reliving something that was a negative experience and like feeling more sad or more depressed or more frustrated, how does feeling more of a negative emotion help me move forward? But what I have noticed is that when I focus on the future, what I'm going to do next, I'm much happier. When I'm focusing on an emotion tied to a past event, I feel much more anxious and depressed.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like the frame around forgiveness could just be like, what is your relationship with this person going to look like or not look like moving forward, rather than like, how do I feel about that?
Yeah, I really try, and I think I've gotten a lot better at it and a lot faster to not indulge in an emotion. I think that's the word, indulge in an emotion. I think that that's it's a disempowering stance to be in. It's like purposely making yourself the victim of a feeling. Why would I ever purposely make myself the victim of anything? And so I think that when you say, I didn't like that felt bad, but I'm gonna do this moving forward. Or, hey, I didn't like what that person did. It felt bad, and I'm fucking here living. So like, it's obviously not that bad.
And what if, as a viewer, I'm someone who has made a mistake and I'm trying to figure out like, do I apologize? How do I approach this person? Like, what would you advise?
I would say, show me, don't tell me. Like, if you really want to apologize, show them with your actions. You agree it was unacceptable if it was, right? And I think that saying words to somebody seems lazy in my opinion. Committing to an action plan and putting in the work to change your behavior demonstrates an apology in my opinion.
It's like evidence of what they actually believe.
It means they learned. A mistake occurred, they changed their behavior. That means they learned. And so if they don't change their behavior,
But you can't actually say I learned my lesson until
you can't say you learned your lesson until you do something different. You did not learn the lesson because if you did, you would act differently.
Yeah, is there an example of something that like you might just by habit say I'm sorry, but
I think that I often apologize for things that happen to people that I love that are outside of my control. Why? I don't know. I don't think it means anything. I think I just say it because other people say it, probably. If I really wanted to change that, I would probably just find a different word to say rather than like, I'm sorry. I think there's two things that I focus on. Lowering my emotional reactivity when I'm upset. So remaining neutral and not showing my emotion because I do not think it's helpful if I'm upset to show that I'm upset because then the other person gets upset and then it escalates. That is probably like, if I were to look at like my job and where I get the most return on effort, lowering my emotional reactivity has had like the highest return on effort that I've had with anything for all of my relationships, both work and personal. I would say a second piece is, yes, being less apologetic, mostly because I think when I say it because I've always said it, not because it means anything. I could probably be more articulate in those situations, but it's usually like in a moment where I feel guilty for something and then I say I'm sorry rather than avoiding the apology, because I don't see how that's a positive for the person I'm even delivering it to. Because the moment, if anyone actually catches me and says like, you don't need to apologize, then I'm like, fuck. Like, why did I do that? You know, like I literally think I said it to Trevor today and he was like, you don't need to say you're sorry.
do you think that a verbal apology can be effective if it is the beginning of the process of changed behavior? Or would you rather someone just do the thing?
I have realized that there's a pattern a lot of people have, which is if somebody says I'm sorry, then it is like, okay, there are no consequences and there is no feedback. Oh, they're sorry. We shouldn't do anything. You don't need to apologize, demonstrate that you've learned. I think that it would be more effective if somebody stated what they learned and what they're committed to doing next. And then you just focus on the future. Even if like when I mess up, I think I've gotten much better at not dwelling in my own mistakes. All that energy that if I spend it dwelling on the mistake I've made, I steal it from the energy I could have taken to move myself forward. I think it's the same for other people. If Alex makes a mistake, if a direct report of mine makes a mistake, and I continue to have them focus on the mistake, I would say that that's probably more likely they'll make the mistake again, not more likely that they're going to improve and commit to and be successful in the next steps that they take to improve. Because they're too busy fixating on the feeling, the mistake, feeling crappy about it because I'm pointing to it. But if you point to do this next, then they're focused on what they do next, not on the thing that happened.